So welcome to a New Jersey Globe special event. It is to say congratulations to Judge Greg Castano, 95 years old, and a legend in Hudson County politics and in New Jersey. The only living delegate to the 1966 New Jersey Constitutional Convention that had just so much of an impact on our state's history. He's lived through a lot of history of his own in Harrison, working with Mayor Frank Rodgers as the Democratic candidate for state Senate against Anthony Imperiale in 1973, and as a Superior Court judge, and as one of the leading citizens of the town that he was born in and grew up in for a lot of years. So Judge, happy birthday and welcome.
Thank you very much.
And it's great to see you here. And we are also joined by our mutual friend, Artie Cifelli, also a legend, a wonderful guy who got his start in politics as a young man in Essex County in Newark. And I apologize, Judge, but I always think that Essex County, if you learn in Essex County, you can go anywhere. But Artie was involved at a young age. His brother was a freeholder in the 1970s, and it's great that both of you have agreed to participate. Judge, I wanted to talk about Frank Rodgers first. You were, as best as I can tell, probably 17 or 18 years old when he was first elected mayor of Harrison, which started a 48-year stint.
1946.
Yeah.
I would have been 17 years old.
And did you know him then? Do you remember that campaign against Fred Gasser?
Yes, I do, for a lot of reasons. First of all, one of the first jobs I ever held was as an office boy for Fred Gasser's law office, which was located at the corner of Broad Market and the Kinney Building in Newark. And I worked there for 3 years. This was, of course, during the war, and they needed people. So I would go to the bank. I would go take documents to be recorded. And then also there were no copy machines then. So if you needed a copy of a deed, you had to have somebody type it. And I could type, so that I made myself very valuable that way. And he was very nice to me, always was. So when the 46 election came, there was some type of, I don't really know what made the break, but Rodgers, who had been a councilman for 10 years by that time, he decided to run for mayor. And he formed what they called the Veterans Party. Of course, that was the big thing, because all the veterans now had been coming home, a big appeal. And there were 4 council seats and the mayoralty, and he won the mayoralty, and he won 3 of the 4 council seats.
Wow.
And but I was disturbed because I was loyal to Gasser, and I felt I had to maintain my loyalty to him, and I did for years, finishing high school, finishing college, all the way through, even when I went into service 2 years, was still the same thing. It's a funny story. At the time, they were constructing a new stadium in Harrison for high school sports. It was on the site at the Passaic River, and I was working for the Star Ledger then, and I wrote a story about the project and so forth. And the town engineer was a cousin of my mother's, so I played him, a big picture of him, and there was no mention of Rodgers. So, and he told me, says, you can't do that again. Joe Condari did, the engineer. Because when he went in on Monday morning, they all said to him, nice story about Joe Condari. He said it was not good for him. So that's the way it continued. I just felt a sense of loyalty that I didn't, I wanted to maintain. Now, after I came out of, after I finished law school and went into service and came out and finished my clerkship, and I was admitted to the bar. Of course, Rodgers was still the mayor. One day, one of Fred Gassert's sons, Fred Gassert Jr., who at the time was the motor vehicle director in Trenton. So he was involved in politics. And I ran into him on the street and he said, can you come and see me? I'd like to talk to you. I said, when? He says, well, can you come now? So I went, and in his basement, he had a bar, poured me a drink, poured himself a drink, and started to tell me, he says, I know, you've been very loyal to my father, but Frank Rodgers would like to make you an assistant town attorney. There's an opening. He says, but you've got to declare, first of all, that you'll take it. And now I can certainly understand that. He didn't want to make an appointment for me to thumb my nose at him. So I said, well, no, this. I said, no, it's all over. We're all friends now. We're doing well. My father's a county council and so forth. He says, you do it. It's better that you be inside of government in your career than outside, just doing whatever you're doing. So he's the one that convinced me finally to go. So I called Rodgers' office and made an appointment, went to see him. I said, I understand there's an opening for assistant town attorney. I would be very interested in it. He said, fine. The very next meeting, I was appointed. And that started a relationship that lasted over the years.
Wow.
Amazing.
So I have to ask this question because this would have been, when you were very young and doing this and he was on his way out, but do you remember Frank Hague?
Of course. Oh, that's another part of the story is that Rodgers ran for, put his ticket in to run against Gassert. He got calls from Frank Hague telling him not to do it. And he completely ignored them. And wow. And as it happened, Frank Hague was on the way out right after that. That was the time that he was defeated by John B. Kenney. So, I do remember him. I never met him, but I do remember him.
So was Frank Rodgers a Kenney guy? Was that part of the coalition?
That's what happened. Is since they both sort of came to power at the same time, and they were both in Hudson County, they became very friendly. Yeah.
And you said you worked for the Star Ledger. I knew you had been a sports writer, for the Star Ledger, for the Newark News. I guess you decided to go get an honest profession and become a lawyer and not stay as a reporter.
Well, it's a funny story. All my life growing up, my mother, who was an immigrant, she came from Italy. My father had been here before and was a citizen, and he went to Italy to find a bride, which was sort of a thing that went around in the Italian groups. And somehow the arrangement was made, and my mother came back, and she was very fond of her brother, who in Italy was a civil engineer. So even as a child, I would say, I don't know what I'm going to be. And she said, you're going to be a civil engineer, just like your uncle. And so that was always in my mind, is I was going to be a civil engineer, to the point that when I graduated from St. Benedict's in Newark, I was looking for a college, and I decided that where I was going to go was Manhattan College in New York, which has an engineering school. So I was on my path. Now my guidance counselor says, you can't be an engineer. Says you can either be a lawyer or a newspaper man, but not an engineer. And actually he was right, because probably everything I would have built would have fallen by now. But anyway, what happened was that was the end of the war. People were coming back from the service. They were claiming their titles to jobs they had before, which they were required to get, and this happened at Benedict's because they had somebody was doing publicity for them, was also a member of the faculty, and so whatever association I had, or as with the Ledger, I was usurped. So, but however, the person who took the job then got a job quickly after a couple of months at Seton Hall University. So, and that's where the story changes, because Seton Hall was looking to build its athletic program after the war. They wanted to get into big time sports. Mm-hmm. And they needed publicity people. So this fellow, Larry Keefe, his name was, he now was in Seton Hall, and he was working in public relations, and he said, he mentioned me to them. So they called me, and they offered me a full-time scholarship to work in the public relations. It's like an athletic scholarship almost. And so we were not wealthy, so I couldn't afford not to take the job. The problem was Seton Hall didn't have an engineering school. So that's when my engineering aspirations ended. And I was there for all 4 years. And then I started thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I was working for the Ledger also. So I was in newspaper business. I was a journalist, a lot of sports. I covered college basketball for them. But I didn't know what I was going to do. And finally I said, well, I did work in an law office, but I wasn't a lawyer. So if there's something that I didn't like about doing that, it's really not relevant. So I took a course in business law to see if I would like it. I liked it, and I knew then that I was going to be a lawyer. So when I graduated, I went to Fordham, registered, and that was the end of my engineering.
Judge,
Judge,
David, I'm sorry. Judge, tell David your days at the Ledger struck up a very good friendship, right? With still someone who you talked to, who was a big reporter and big sports writer at the Ledger. Who is it that you keep in contact with? I
came in contact with, eventually with Sid Dorfman,
wow.
who was, and we became really, really good friends also. I made a lot of friends along the way, so then now I was no longer at Seton Hall. I was at Fordham, in which I went to school in the morning. And then in the evening, I worked there in the office. And actually, it was a sort of a sports bureau that Sid ran for the Ledger.
Right.
But I would get a byline in the Ledger. My first byline, though, I got when I was in high school, and that was in the Sunday Call. Do you remember the Sunday Call?
I don't. But I will tell you this. I also work for Sid Dorfman.
Oh, did you?
As a high school sports writer for the Star Ledger when I was in high school, 1970s. He paid me $5 a game. I don't know what he paid you, but he paid me $5 a game.
So I got more than $5, but I was glad to get whatever I could get.
But what a wonderful guy! What a wonderful guy! And
the best friends that I made at working for him is Jerry Eisenberg.
Right.
Yeah.
Whom I still talk to regularly. He's out near Las Vegas somewhere, and he's told me he's written another book that's coming out now.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
And start a baseball season. So, but anyway, so that's what I did, and then of course Seton Hall got really, really good. And this is when I was at Fordham. So I was full-time coverage of the Seton Hall basketball team. I was a member of the Metropolitan Basketball Writers. I'd go to the lunches every week in New York. I voted in the polls for which was the best team, all that kind of stuff. And then when I was second year in law school, Seton Hall played and got to the finals of the NIT, but they lost in the final. But in the following year, they won. And of course, at that time, the NIT was deemed by a lot of people as being the championship and being the championship of the country in basketball. And so that's
Wow.
So that's where we were, of course. But then after I graduated from law school, I took the bar, but I hadn't finished my clerkship. And finally, the draft board caught up with me. And I was inducted into the Army for 2 years. And so that's how that all went.
Yeah. And then you wound up serving for a time as an assistant prosecutor in Hudson County.
I did. This was after my stint. I was still a assistant town attorney in Harrison, which is a part-time job. And then later, another funny story. One of the things I did as assistant town attorney was handle the tax appeals for the town that were filed. And then the tax assessor died. So there was a vacancy. And one day, it was a Sunday, I remember it now. I came out of church on Sunday morning and went across the street, and there was Frank Rodgers. He said, I want to talk to you. I said, yes. I want to make you the tax assessor. I said, the tax assessor? He says, yes. I said, well, it was never one of my ambitions, but if you want me to do that, I will be. So then I became the tax assessor of Harrison. And that went on for a few years. And my first job, or a legal job, was I was a law clerk to Judge William F. Smith in the Federal District Court. And I was with him for 3 years, supposed to be only 2, but he was appointed by the United States Supreme Court to chair a group of the judges in Brooklyn, New York, in the Eastern District that had the biggest backlog in the whole country. And so I thought that was pretty interesting, and I thought I'd stay another year, which I did. And by the way, he is one of the 2 top, in my book, top judges and lawyers that I've ever met. He was a wonderful man, very unassuming, just a great person. And so I then, after I did my 3 years, I needed to get another job. So I did. And a fellow by the name of Tom Durkin, who was an assemblyman at the time in Essex County. He had a law firm, and he was a senior at St. Benedict's when I was a freshman, and his brother was a freshman when I was a senior. So I knew him, I knew the family. I went with him. And I was with him for 3 years. I did some trial work, but not much. I did a few, but I wanted to do more. And now I knew his brother was passing the bar, was about to pass the bar. And I felt a little sort of crowded. So I decided that I wanted to do something else. And so I decided that what I wanted to do was be an assistant prosecutor, because it was a great job. You could get your salary as an assistant prosecutor, act as such. You could also have a practice on the side, and I was intent on building my practice. Yeah. So now how do I do this? Well, of course, I call Frank Rodgers. And I said to him, I would like to be an assistant prosecutor. He says, well, let me see what I can do. So I think it was a week or so later in the afternoon, and he called me. He said, can you come over to the town hall? I said, sure. So I went over, and the door to his office was closed. And, and the secretary said, oh, yeah, he's waiting for you. So I went in, and sitting in his chair behind his desk was not Frank Rodgers, but John V. Kenny. So he says, I understand you want to be a prosecutor. I said, yes. He said, all right, Frank speaks highly of you. He said, we'll see what I can do. He says, you'll probably get a call from the prosecutor next week sometime. And you just go over and see him. So that's what happened. I got a call. Jim Tumulty was the prosecutor. And things had happened which were in my favor. The previous prosecutor, who they changed the rules. With the previous prosecutor, lawyers who were assistant prosecutors would work 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. Mm-hmm. Well, they changed the rule. Everybody had to work full time. You could have a practice, but it had to be on your own time. So a lot of the assistant prosecutors had quit. And so he had a very small staff who was looking to staff. He had yet not appointed anyone. So I went to see him and sat down. He was an odd individual. He was a nice guy, odd guy. So he told me, he said, yes, I understand you want to be a prosecutor. I said, yes, I would like to very much. He said, all right. He says, now, do you have any other jobs? I said, yeah, I'm the tax assessor in Harrison. He says, well, you got to give that up. I said, I don't think Frank Rodgers would like that. He said, you got to give it up. So I said, okay. I went back and I went directly to Mayor Rodgers. I said, he told me I've got to give up. I just ignore him. Don't bother. And it never came up again. In fact, one of the things was the lawyer, Abe Miller, very active as a criminal defense lawyer in Jersey City. And we'd be picking a jury. And he'd come over and put his hand on my shoulder and look at the jury. He says, does anybody know Greg Castano, the tax assessor in Harrison? Totally deflated my position I thought. But and that's the way it remained, actually. And so I got to be a prosecutor. Then they needed lawyers badly because they didn't have any. And I wound up for a period of about 4 months, which is really what I wanted to do, trying cases without a break. And so, doing trials every day, that's the best way to build your skills. And I found that very, very helpful and worked out. So,
and then John V. Kenney, they called him the boss. That he was the Hudson County political boss, and everything went through him. Something important happened, across the country for politics in the early 60s. The U.S. Supreme Court had the one man, one vote ruling, and it totally changed the way legislators, we're going to talk about New Jersey, how the legislature was composed. And in those days, each county got 21. Each county had one senator. There were 21 senators. Salem had one senator. Essex, Bergen, Hudson had one senator, and then the legislature was apportioned. That was ruled unconstitutional, and so I don't remember it myself, but I've read a bunch about it, and they tried a lot of different fixes. And I remember there was one week where they gave the senator from Salem County had one vote, and the senator from Essex County had 19 votes, and that lasted a couple days. They realized that wouldn't work, so they decided to have a constitutional convention.
They did. The court, I think, actually, New Jersey court ordered it.
Yes.
And so it was done pursuant to. In fact, knowing that I was going to talk to you today, I found this little thing in my records. It's the Constitutional Convention of 1966, official rules adopted March 21, 1966.
Yeah. And so you had to run for that. You had to become a delegate. You had to run in an election
because delegates had to be elected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so again, I was not really fully aware of the whole thing, but there were, and it was done on a bipartisan basis.
Mm-hmm.
So from Hudson, there was a group of 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and they were appointed by the political chairman of the county. So Frank Rodgers said to me, he says, "I put your name in to be a delegate to the Constitutional Convention." I said, "Okay." And so I was a delegate. I was one of 3 Democratic nominees. Jim Dugan was another one. I know you knew Jim Dugan because that's when we spoke. You and I spoke last when he passed. And so that's what I went. And there was a lot, but like a lot of these conferences, even though there's a group who's supposed to do voting, the real work is done in committee,
right?
Presented. So this went on. Now, this was very important because a lot of the delegates were legislators, senators, and assembly people. And they were scared that they would be somehow placed in a position where they did not have the comfort of the whole county vote. And so they felt, they were looking to protect themselves. So they were really the most active people in the convention, in the various committees and so forth.
So Billy Musto from Union City was there, I think.
He was there.
And he was they had just brought the number of Senate seats up. So he, I think, just got to the Senate.
I'm sorry?
I think he had just gotten to the Senate. I think he was in his first year in the Senate.
I don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't remember that, but yeah, that could be.
And,
but he had been there for a while.
Yeah. And Bill Kelly also there. And
yeah, he was there. He was one of the
senator.
Yeah, and so was Musto.
Yeah. And one of the things I've read is that Musto and another Hudson County delegate Phelps, who had served as an ambassador to the Dominican Republic under Truman and had been in the New York legislature, but he was living in Jersey City. And I read that Musto and Phelps were very serious about a one house legislature.
Yeah,
they wanted to get rid of just one house, and that was how serious was that? How serious a discussion was that?
It was serious. At the end, on the last day, I think there were 5 proposals to be voted on.
Mhm.
The first 2 were unicameral. Even Jimmy Dugan was interested in unicameral. I didn't see it, as I saw no benefit to it at all. And so I was not, but I didn't have much to say. And we would go to meetings. There were about 12 to 13 meetings at the Rutgers University, which is where all the meetings occurred. And they were batting back and forth on all of these proposals. And then on the final day, and it was supposed to be the final day of the convention, it was in June, I think, I forget what the date was. And then they started bringing them up. And one by one, the unicameral proposals were rejected. And then they went to the bicameral litigation. But there was serious challenges, because, as I said before, these legislators looked at these proposals and were wondering what they meant for them. So there were compromises here and compromises there. And on this last day, it was supposed to start at 2:00, and it was like 6:00, and nothing had been resolved.
Yeah. Judge, that still happens today in the legislature. So that's
yes, it is.
It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
They just keep the clock going, Judge.
But then I understand Governor Hughes stepped in to try to resolve the compromise. And they had a meeting. Some people, there were a number of people who were involved, and I certainly wasn't one of them. I wasn't one of the major players. And he couldn't do anything. So at 9:00, they had to adjourn the meeting until the following day. And it's still unresolved. And it continued the following day. And eventually, at the end, there was a plan that was adopted and presented. And then from there, it went on to be implemented. Even after that, there were changes that were made. And even after that, there were changes that were made by the courts.
Right. Yeah, because welcome to New Jersey, right? After everything is done, the court still has the last say on it. But
I have a funny story about that. One of the delegates among us, Democratic delegate, was a very well regarded appellate lawyer. Everybody regarded him. Everybody liked him. He was very, very good. And he was Jewish, and he spoke with a little Jewish accent. Just a wonderful, wonderful person. As a person, as a human being, he was a wonderful person. And he knew that I was not married at that time. And he had gotten married late and had a child. And he absolutely adored the child. It was all that he would talk about. And because he knew I wasn't married, he said to me, he says, in this journey, he says, you can't travel and not go to the most visit in life. That's have you married and have children. So I don't know how much he affected me. I don't think he really did. It was very funny. That was in June. In October, I got married.
Wow.
Judge, just curious from my own, who was a Republican delegate from Hudson County at the time? Like who, do you remember the Republicans then or no?
I do. In fact, I have them written here somewhere. A fellow named McPhail. He was, I think, maybe chairman of the Republican Committee of Hudson County for whatever that was.
You had Judge Galkin also, right?
Who, pardon?
Judge Galkin, Jeffrey Galkin, he was also.
Yes, he was a friend of mine. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of who the other.
That's okay. I just was wondering how.
Yeah, no, they found, there was a fellow from Kearney, a lawyer from Kearney, Cal Cook.
Okay.
Was the other one. And the other ones will come to my mind. I don't want to take time to look for them.
That's fine. I just good.
Was this how bipartisan was this constitutional convention? Was it about Democrats versus Republicans, or was it about big counties and small counties looking at how they're going to be affected?
The principle was to arrange something that would satisfy some measure of equality for all voters. That was the purpose of the convention. But it was really also a fight between Republicans and Democrats. At the time, you had a Democratic governor, Hughes, and you had a Republican legislature. So this was it. It was lifeblood for those people. I mean, I was just a spectator to the whole thing. So, and
you had to be one of the youngest delegates, I would imagine.
I probably was. Jimmy Dugan and I were probably two of the youngest. Jeff Galkin was one of the youngest too.
Yeah.
So.
And what about how did you decide on there's going to be 40 senators and 80 assembly members? How did that number come to be?
On the proposal that was negotiated. There was negotiation going on all over the place on every little thing, that existed. And that's why it took 2 days to come up with a proposal. And it's amazing that they came up with a proposal in 2 days. So, and that was it. That was the end of the convention.
So it could have been more, it could have been less. It's just that was a number that was negotiated late one night, and that's, I guess, how it is forever.
Yes, numbers and so forth.
Yeah.
Now, what I didn't know was that those decisions would lead eventually to my running for office.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because the district that was created was partially the one district which was different was, and there were several of them, but this one is the one I know, consisted of municipalities in Essex County and municipalities in Hudson County. So there was a senator and 2 assemblymen.
Right. This is 1973, right?
Yeah.
So this was the first time that you were really getting districts that were drawn based upon even population, not on whether it was within one, or entirely within one county.
There's a case called, I think, Jackman versus Bodine, I think is the name of it. And there's about 4 of them, 4 opinions in it following each other as they went along. But in any event, this now is a district that had in it from Hudson County, Harrison, Kearney, and East Newark. And the other one, I'll think of it in a minute. Yeah. I have.
So I can help you a little bit with it. So it was part of it was North Ward, part of the East Ward of Newark.
It was Essex County, North Ward County, Essex County, and East Ward, Essex County, and the other one was
Belleville.
And Belleville. That's Belleville. Yeah. So So this is the ward. So they again, Frank Rodgers. I said to him, "Here's a chance to get a senator."
Mhm.
And he said, "Yeah, it's good." So I saw him later. Sea Caucus was the other
Right.
All right.
in Hudson, and I said to him, he says, "Well, who did you pick?" And he looked at me and he said, "You." I was astonished. Right? But what happened though is Essex County had its own slate, and Hudson County had its slate. So there was a primary to determine who the delegates were going to be.
No.
And I was the delegate from Hudson to be not delegate, the candidate from Hudson to be the senator, and a lady by the name of Mary Senator, who was a commissioner in Belleville,
Right.
was the candidate
Right.
for Essex County. And the other delegate, the assembly delegates from Hudson were Jack Cali, who later became the warden at Hudson County, and I don't remember who the
It was Mike Adebato.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
So Frank Rodgers went and got involved with Adebato. The brother was the North Ward chairman, and together and everything else. So we had expected that the North Ward was going to vote for our candidates, and we were going to vote for his candidate, mainly his brother, who was a candidate for the assembly. So it was Cali, Mike Adebato, and me. That was the ticket that we had.
Yeah. And you were supporting. You were on the line in Hudson County,
right.
and off the line in Essex, but you were supporting Brendan Byrne for governor.
Yes, that eventually happened.
Right. Yeah.
And in any event, what happened? What happened was that we got some help from people in Belleville who didn't particularly like Mary Senator, and in any event, we won. And Mary Senator sued me, saying I wasn't living in the district, and the suit was thrown out. And so that's the way it went. And then we had the general election.
Right. And you were running against, I mean, I don't want to go off the primary for a second, because that was a pretty impressive primary, because on the other side, it was Mary Senator, but Frank McGarrow was an incumbent assemblyman,
Right.
and Finney Alati, who was a legendary guy from the East Ward. His son John was a friend of mine who was a great freeholder from Essex County.
Great person.
So this was a real primary, and and I want people to sort of get an idea on the numbers here. You won Hudson County with 88% of the vote, but you only got 28% of the vote in the Essex portion. So it was the Adebato faction that sort of helped move that over. You won the primary by a little under 1,400 votes, but it was 54%. So it was a fairly solid win.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty good performance running off the line.
Yes.
In Essex.
Yes. We were lucky that way. I don't know how seriously most people took this. This was totally new. It was a concept that maybe the public generally didn't understand, whatever. But there are a lot of reasons for it.
Yeah.
But in any event, we then go to the general election, and we have a Republican slate that was largely from Essex County. And we had our slate. And there was an additional factor.
Yes.
And his name was Tony Imperiale.
Yes.
And he was a folk hero at the time.
He was, and I will say it, Judge, so you don't have to. Tony Imperiale was a bit of a racist.
Oh, I was going to say that he was.
Yeah. He was a racist, and you were not, and Assemblyman Richard Fiore, the Republican former Assemblyman, he. A little bit more moderate on these views, but Imperiale was, I mean, he was larger than life. I mean, maybe even literally, but he, would ride an elephant down Bloomfield Avenue, sitting on the top of the elephant. And I remember once he was in a Columbus Day parade with it was a lion or a tiger. Dressed as Julius Caesar.
I tell you, the big, because this sums up the whole race.
Yeah.
The big event before Election Day was the Columbus Day Parade in Newark. Oh, it was a big thing. The Columbus Day Parade, I marched with, and actually I remember Donald Payne was running with Essex County, and I was sort of on the side. He says, "Come on, walk with us. You're a candidate." Fine. And I carried my little flag on my shoulder, and most people didn't know who the heck I was. And Anthony rode an elephant. So that's the comparison of my race for Senate. And in addition to which, Frank Rodgers at the time was going through a serious problem. His wife was dying. And so he did not have the time to devote or get together. He just couldn't do it. There was a councilman in Harrison called Fred Nugent. And Fred Nugent was the warden of the jail at the time. And Fred said, I'll take care of Secaucus. And he did. So I carried Secaucus. I carried Harrison. Kearney had a Republican mayor at that time. And so I don't even remember whether I carried Kearney. I don't remember. But in any event, I didn't prevail. And so Tony Imperiale was the senator in that district. Now, the district was only to last 2 years as the first district to get it going. And then there was supposed to be another election after 2 years. So you were only elected for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, by the way, Frank Rodgers' wife died and so forth, so things moved on.
And you went back to just being a lawyer in Harrison and
I was still an assistant prosecutor.
Right.
I was still a tax assessor.
Yeah.
And I still had my practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went back to it. But that's what happened. That's what occurred.
Do you feel that Imperiale was sort of sensationalized and made into a sort of a folk hero, after the riots and I mean, how did he get to be so popular in that part of New Jersey?
Well, there was a dispute going on in North Newark, I guess, close to Belleville.
Mm-hmm.
There was a project known as Kawaida Towers. Mm-hmm. And it was supposed to be a huge housing project. And everybody played it up. It's going to be all occupied by blacks. So all the people in in Belleville and in North Newark, all of whom, a lot of them were just racists. They got spooked, and that was one of the factors that was involved in that race. So,
And Artie, you were young, but you grew up in that you were in that district.
Yeah.
What do you remember?
Was a good family friend, and like you said, John Alati. We have stories from our younger days, and John Alati actually babysitting and stuff.
Yeah.
But Finney was a big insurance guy. He was our insurance broker.
Yes.
And, a delightful gentleman. Delightful gentleman.
Yeah.
And
Judge, if I could take you in another direction just briefly, if I can. David alluded to it about Governor Byrne. Tell me about how helpful you were to Governor Byrne in his first race.
I first met Governor Byrne long before when he was a prosecutor in Essex County, even before he was the prosecutor. And he was a good friend of Tom Durkin. But what happened was an opening developed in the prosecutor's office. I forget who had been the prosecutor, but for some reason, he either retired. I don't remember specifically what. So somebody wanted to be prosecutor. And both Tom Durkin and Brendan Byrne wanted to be prosecutor. And they both were, at the time, were friends. In fact, Durkin's oldest child, his godfather was Brendan Byrne.
Wow.
So that's how close they were. But this now broke it up. And what happened was that Brendan got the prosecutor's job, and Tom got counsel to the commission, sewer commission, and that's what it was all. But it still then created tension between the two of them. But in any event, that's how I got to know him. As a matter of fact, Durkin hadn't yet passed the bar when they were still working together in the same office, and Brendan had, and my father had a small workers' compensation case, nothing big or special. So Durkin couldn't go, and so Brendan went. So I still have a workers' compensation judgment signed by Brendan Byrne, when he was, even before he was prosecutor.
Yeah.
But in any event, I continued to know him as he became the prosecutor. Got to know him. There were a couple of things we did together and so forth. So he was a friend. But now he was running for office. He's running for governor. And he had one major problem. He did not have a major county to support him because Essex had already designated someone else. I forget who it was.
Ralph DeRose. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So, but this was big for him, as he looked at the whole picture. So somebody in his committee called me. He said, do you think you could somehow arrange a meeting of Frank Rodgers and Brendan Byrne to discuss the idea of whether Hudson might be willing to support him? I said, yeah, I think I can do that. So I called Frank, and he said, sure, I'll meet with him. And ever the politician, Frank says, but I'll meet with him in your office. More. I said, okay. So the date came for the meeting. It was supposed to be like at 9 a.m. And one of my secretarial staff got there early, as she always did. And she opened the door, went in, locked it from the inside. She didn't know who this man was that was walking along the sidewalk waiting. Of course, it was Brendan. And when I got there, Brendan was still outside, the girl was inside, but I couldn't blame her for it. She didn't know who she was. So he came in, and eventually Frank came, two of them got into my office. I excused myself. I wasn't to be part of it. And they spoke. And actually, Frank then went through the Hudson County group, and Hudson County supported Byrne. And of course, Byrne won.
Yeah.
So that's the Brendan Byrne election story.
Yeah. So 4 years later, Byrne is running for re-election.
He is now no longer as popular as he had been.
Yeah, he wasn't. They called him one-term Byrne, and he surprised everybody.
And in fact, he called me and wanted to have dinner with me, and at Mormon. Remember, they were doing work at the other place and so forth. So I went down, and it was just Brendan and me having lunch and talking about it, and asking me about Hudson County and what could be done and so forth. And I left saying to myself, boy, you are in trouble. If the best you can do in Hudson County is talk to me about it. And
But you were his entree. Entree is the first part.
It all worked out.
So what happened then is I guess Mayor Rodgers decided he wanted to avenge your loss and ran against Imperiale.
And now he was no longer had the problem they had earlier. He was active in every way, and who can better negotiate with politicians than Frank Rodgers? And he got Lottie. He got his counterpart in the North Ward.
Adebato, yeah.
And so then he became senator.
Right, and fairly decisively, and then
and by that time, Imperiale had worn out.
Yeah,
worn his welcome, and people were all onto him, and so he was no longer a factor.
Right, and I'm hoping I get this right, but so he goes into the Senate. He's now Hudson County's 4th senator.
Right.
And in those days you could hold 2 offices. So he remained as mayor. That's how he got to stay as mayor 48 years, is he didn't have to give it up.
Oh, he never would have given up being mayor.
Yeah.
Under no circumstance.
And so now here he is, a freshman senator, and now a chance to influence who the judges are in Hudson County. And
he was not the source of my becoming a judge. Because I had worked when I was running with Brendan. A lot of times the two of us would be together and campaigning and everything else. And I got to know a lot of people on his staff. And so I had I didn't tell you this part of the story, which figures in here. I had been nominated for a judgeship. Well, I actually hadn't been nominated. I had been called down to Trenton, and his general counsel said, "No, I'm making 3 appointments. Going to be announced on Sunday." Said, and the governor wants to, this is Cahill, appoint you as a Superior Court judge. I said, "Oh, that's good." And the other 2, one was a prosecutor, I think, in Morris, and I forget what the 3rd one was. He said, "It'll be in the paper on Sunday." And so I pick up the paper on Sunday, and there it is, the appointment of the other 2, but my name isn't in there. So then first thing I did on Monday, I said, "What happened?" He says, "You didn't tell me you had a problem with the senators." I said, "I didn't think I had a problem with the senators." "You do." So I think there were 3 or 4 senators at that time from Hudson, and went to see each one of them. Guarini was one of them. I went to see the first 3, and they were all okay with it. And said, no, we have no problem with it. So that left only one, and that was Billy Musto.
Yeah.
So I called him, and he said, come up to my house. So I went to his house, and I said, do I have trouble with you? He says, yes, you do. And he said, and I had known him from the convention, so we got along fine. Well, one day when I was in the prosecutor's office on one second stint when I was there with Jeff Galkin, Jeff wasn't there. But that morning, call came in, and since I was now the number one man, the call came to me. It was somebody whom I knew, I forget even who it was now, who said, Senator Musto said that he expects 2 people to come here this morning pretending to be FBI agents, and they're phonies. So he would like you to send somebody here to confront them. I said, well, I don't think I want to do that. I said, if, however, somebody does show up and they are not legitimate FBI agents, call us and immediately I'll have somebody there. So when I went to him, what happened was it was Musto's father who was later indicted and convicted and so forth. So when I went to see Musto that day to find out why he had objected to me, she said, remember, you got calls from people and you wouldn't send anybody there? I said, yes, I did. She says, I don't think I can support you. And I looked at him and I said, well, if it happened again, I would do the same thing. And then I left, and that was it. Wow. And so I didn't make it at that time. But then later on, pick up the story where he started. One of the people who had worked on the Byrne campaign came to visit me at my office. And he was telling me, how's Brendan doing? No, he's doing fine. Everything is good. Yes. Is there anything we can do for you? I said, well, I thought I wanted to be a Superior Court judge, but I have a promise. I have a problem. I have a problem with Billy Musto, who's still there. And so he says, well, I'll pass it on to Brendan. So then Brendan went to the fellow who was the chair of the Hudson litigation. And I guess spoke to him, whatever, told him the story. And I guess the guy said, well, we'll pass him even if Billy Musto doesn't agree. And so that's how I became a Superior Court judge.
Wow. I never knew that story, and that's...
And not many people do know it. No.
Yeah, well, we do now. So thank you. Thank you. So you became a judge, I guess, 1978.
Right.
You handled some really controversial cases. The Bayonne teacher strike, the Hudson County jail was a big issue.
Jail dominated really for years. And then I had another one that no one remembers, but which got daily attention in the Daily News, page 3. Mm-hmm. And that was, there was a suit, a palimony suit between a woman who was a Channel 4, I think, a daily announcer, well-known at the time. I don't remember her name now. And she was involved in a relationship from quite long with a fellow who was, he had been a used car salesman And now she was making really big bucks, and he was looking to get half of those big bucks. And they split. They were now living in Secaucus. So the case was before me, and I tried it. And the Daily News because she was the TV personality,
Yeah.
on them every day. And I decided he hadn't contributed anything anything financially to the relationship. So I gave everything to her, except he had a bicycle, and I gave the bicycle.
So you were on the bench. You were there, I guess, one full 7-year term, and you decided you wanted to go back to your law practice and back to Harrison.
I decided. I think the salary then was $70,000.
Mm-hmm.
I had 3 sons in college and 1 in prep school, so the tuition was bigger than the salary.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't stay. So I had to leave.
And so you went back, you returned to Harrison, and I think you were in, if my memory is correct, you were in West New York for a little while.
That was separate and apart.
Yeah.
I now no longer was a tax assessor because I had to give that up when I became a judge, or any other position. So I didn't have those. And I decided that I really wanted to go with a bigger firm where I just wouldn't have to start from scratch. I could just jump in. So I went with one firm, and I stayed there for 3 years. But that didn't produce the income that it was supposed to produce. So Ken McPherson, lawyer, and Dave Waters had a law firm, and I was very friendly with them. And we were close personal and social friends. And so they made me an offer, and I went to them, and I stayed there for a long time.
Yeah. And I should also point out, because I noticed this when I was doing a little bit of preparation for talking to you. Frank Rodgers did 6 years in the state Senate. It would probably should have been your seat, but he did 6 years there, and then there was and then he ran for I guess in Hudson higher office. He became the county clerk, and you got to swear him in.
Pardon?
You got to swear him in as the county clerk.
Oh yeah. Well, after I became a judge, I always swore him in, even when he was his terms as mayor. Yes.
Yeah.
Do that. That was not a conflict.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you because I promised you a half hour, and you've been kind, and we're now an hour in, so I don't want to overstay my welcome here.
No, I'm overstaying my welcome.
No. And this is for political junkies like Artie and I. This is just gold. I could do this all day long, but I wanted to get just some of your quick impressions of some of the people that you saw in Hudson County, whether it was Anthony DeFino or Mayor Whalen or Mayor Jordan, and just get some reactions to them.
Anthony DeFino and I were both, I was there first and he came later, we're both assistant prosecutors.
Mm-hmm.
And we became good friends because he's a very smart guy, a very funny guy, just a good person. And then he resigned and then ran for mayor of West New York, and he won. And I worked a little bit on his campaign and so forth. As a result, I was appointed an assistant town attorney in West New York. And then there were 2 people in succession who became town attorneys. And he had fights with both of them. And so therefore there was a vacancy, and I became the town attorney in West New York, which I had to give up when I became a judge, obviously. Yeah, that was my relationship with Tony.
And did you know? I mean, I assume you knew Mayor Whalen, Mayor Jordan?
Yes, as a result of my Senate campaign,
Yeah.
I got to know Whalen and Jordan and all the people in the Democratic picture.
Yeah. Is it Frank? I mean, as you look back upon, your years in New Jersey politics, and I guess it's, you're a law, you were working as a teenager for Mayor Gasser, so you're probably talking about 75, 80 years in Hudson County politics. When you look back at all of those people, Frank Rodgers still your favorite?
Oh, no question about it. He was a personal friend. He was more than anything else. I had something I wanted to say because I knew you were going to ask me about Frank Rodgers.
Yeah.
And people always ask me, what was his secret? What did
Yeah.
he do? Why did he last so long? Every 2 years usually didn't become 4 years until much later. He would be running, and then he would be running for other offices and so forth. So, and I remember I purposely copied this at the time, and he was asked, how was he able to keep this position for so long? And this is his quote. So I'm reading his quote. It says, you have to work at it, and you have to be willing to listen to people. Even though these people may be criticizing you, they may also have a good point to make. I like serving people and help them if I can. At least I am upfront with them. If I can help you, I will. If I can't, I'll tell you. And that is really his essence. His essence was, I think what most people said about him, he was a man of his word. Yeah. That's what he did, and that's what he had.
Wow.
Judge, let me ask you real quick, and I know, like David said, we have to go, but 2 quick questions. What do you think of Harrison today as you pass by and see what it's become? And what do you think Mayor Rodgers would think about his hometown, looking at it today?
Well, I think what it's become isn't bad. And secondly, I think he would have liked it because I became the redevelopment attorney for the town. And all of this, after Rodgers died, Ray McDonough became the mayor. And he and a fellow by the name of Peter Higgins, who was a councilman, were looking to revive the town and get some more revenue and everything. And so they made a big effort to bring in industrial clients, because that's what the base of it was. Harrison was known as the beehive of industry. Okay. But what happened is, after the war, the buildings that were there were starting to deteriorate. They weren't really practical. They weren't in accord with the way industry was being developed and so forth. And so they were unsuccessful. And when I was assistant town attorney, and that was later than that, I had gone to Mayor Rodgers and proposed that we have some kind of redevelopment. And he went along with it. And we had a location, but my vision at that time was much smaller than it eventually developed. And we had a redevelopment area, and we had a person who was willing to be a redeveloper. But unfortunately, there was an economic downturn, and it never materialized.
Right.
So Rodgers and McDonough had remembered that, and they called me. This is how I then became redevelopment attorney, and said that they would like to do something in the redevelopment area. And so the first thing is they wanted a redevelopment agency, so I had to go to Trenton to try to get a redevelopment agency approved. And finally it was, and then the redevelopment occurred, and you have the soccer stadium. You know, there's probably the biggest well-known development piece. And there's a lot of residential. I would have liked to have seen it develop with more commercial, so that there would be activity there. That's what I was looking for. Create activity down by the railroad station. The railroad station is a big key for that. And it didn't, not yet, but I think it will eventually develop that also.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So my last question to you, Judge, is, and I hope I get an affirmative decision from the judge on this. Can we make plans right now for February 17th, 2029, for your 100th birthday, to talk more about your life?
If I'm vertical, I'll be here.
Okay. Judge, thank you so much. This was an honor. This really was an honor, and well, and I appreciate it. And I think people appreciate learning that history. And Artie Cifelli, as always, thank you for putting this together.
Absolutely, Judge. Good to see you again.
Good. Happy birthday, Your Honor.
Happy birthday, Judge.